And welcome back. We are going to go ahead and dive into a different kind of concept today. We're introducing this thing called normals. And just what does that mean? Well, it's probably best explained through a little bit of an example. And to get started here, I have our basic cube to get started here. But I want to first introduce this concept of overlays. So if we come up here to the viewport overlays, so we can see we have some different options and stuff like that. But the thing I want to do is today look at face orientation. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to find out. And you could probably take some guesses of what that means. But if I check that box, the first thing you'll notice is that my cube is now blue. So let's go ahead and dive right in here with these normals, but we don't have much information here right now. So what we need to do first is change this cube here into edit mode. And if I do that, you'll see that I now have a lot more information available to me. And of course we can come in here and play around with these different things. But the thing I really want to look at, again, are these normals. You can see it says normals right here. And of course you can see we have one for vertex, one for edge, and one for face. Let's just go ahead and look at face just for a second. And if I go ahead and stretch this normal out, you can see I get these blue lines kind of appearing, and they're moving in each direction. So you can see how they move out and radiate in each direction that we expect this cube to be. And that means, of course, our faces are moving in the directions we would expect. And this is perfectly expected because this is just our default cube. But again, this gives us a nice perspective of how these faces are structured. So if we want to see how these normals really come into play and where things are facing, right now these normals say, hey, everything's facing outward. If I switch to scaling this here, all right, and so if I go ahead and select this whole cube and go ahead and scale this, and I actually drag this, it'll get smaller, smaller, smaller. Oh, and now it's orange, and you can see I have these normals here, and everything looks fine. But if I keep dragging this until it gets a little bit larger, we got this nice kind of reddish orange cube. We don't see those normals anymore, all right? And it's not just because of the size of the cube, and the normals would actually adjust if I had this the right way. We've actually kind of flipped that cube inside out. Now, at our first glance, we might say there's nothing wrong with this cube. Sure, we flipped it inside out, but it's fine, right? So if we scale this up again here, so if we take our lovely little cube and we go ahead and scale him up so those normals disappear, there we go. And we say, okay, no big deal, right? If we go ahead and just look at these in our different viewpoints here, everything looks good. We don't see anything really kind of wrong for this. If I go back to object mode even, you can see it just looks like a regular cube. Everything's looking pretty good. We'll take face orientation off here just for a second. Everything still looks good. But where does this actually start changing? So if I go in here and I want to start seeing what this looks like. And this happens a lot when we start rendering things for the game engines and stuff. You'll see there's this option called backface culling. So this hides the back side of faces. And if you remember what I said is that we kind of flipped our cube inside out. So if I go ahead and check that, you can see we now have this option that makes this cube kind of disappear. And you can see these sides, they kind of keep disappearing and reappearing based upon wherever I'm at. And that doesn't just apply here to in the viewport mode. If I switch over to my other modes such as shading and I go to my materials property, and one thing you'll notice is that if we were to turn those on here in our properties, is that we can actually go to our settings, hit backface culling there, and we'll see the same thing happen here. So how can we fix this, or make it so that way this is not going to be an issue where our faces are just disappearing like this? All right, well, so we got a couple options in front of us here without having to worry about trying to resize this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into edit mode here, and I'm just going to go ahead and if I do Shift N, you can see, oh, look, we have a cube again. All right, so that's one way because what it did is it recalculated normals. And you can notice down here we have this option now that says recalculate normals, and it says inside. That is one way. Now, if it doesn't show up here, we have to do a little bit more digging to actually get those normals to recalculate. So if we go up here and start looking around, like where can we find that different thing that we're going to need to go ahead and just redo those normals? Well, if we come up here to our mesh, all right, we can see there's a normal options here, and we can either recalculate outside or inside. And of course, we just did recalculate outside because of the way that was. Or we, of course, have these other options here. So if I were to, for example, let's say I just want to take this shape here. I'm going to go back over here. And let's say I only want to grab this face here, right? And I just want to grab that face, and I'm just going to see if I go ahead and do normals here and I flip that normal, we can see we now have a hollow box here because remember we do have that back culling on, so that makes it look as though that face has just disappeared. Now with this normal inverted, one thing I want to show is that as a reminder, if we are in different modes here and we want to see, hey, how does this look? if this normal is inverted in a way that this face is hidden here, if it doesn't exist, we of course could end up with transparent sides. We could end up seeing this here where everything is just kind of being transparent. So it's just something to keep in mind as we work here, as we start getting into these. These normals are a great way to make sure we're kind of operating within our bounds. Again, because otherwise, we will have some of those weird behaviors that we may not ideally want. I mean, if you're going for something transparent, obviously that's not the end of the world, but this is a great resource, a great tool for us to be able to use as we start moving forward.